White supremacy or white supremacism is the belief that white people are superior to those of other races and thus should dominate them. The belief favors the maintenance and defense of white power and privilege. White supremacy has roots in the now discredited doctrine of scientific racism, and was a key justification for colonialism. It underlies a spectrum of contemporary movements including neo-Confederates, neo-Nazism and Christian identity. Different forms of white supremacy put forth different conceptions of who is considered white, and groups of white supremacists identify various racial and ethnic enemies, most commonly those of African ancestry, indigenous peoples of the Americas and Australia, and Jews. As a political ideology, it imposes and maintains social, political, historical, or institutional domination by white people. This ideology has been put into effect through socio-economic and legal structures such as the Atlantic slave trade, Jim Crow laws in the United States, the White Australia policies from the 1890s to the mid-1970s, and apartheid in South Africa. In addition, this ideology is embodied in the white power social movement. Since the early 1980s, the white power movement has been committed to overthrowing the United States government and establishing a white homeland using paramilitary tactics. In academic usage, particularly in critical race theory or intersectionality, white supremacy can also refer to a social system in which white people enjoy structural advantages over other ethnic groups, on both a collective and individual level, despite formal legal equality. White supremacy has ideological foundations that date back to 17th-century scientific racism, the predominant paradigm of human variation that helped shape international relations and racial policy from the latter part of the Age of Enlightenment until the late 20th century. White supremacy was dominant in the United States both before and after the American Civil War, and it also persisted for decades after the Reconstruction era. In the antebellum South, this included the holding of African Americans in chattel slavery, in which 4 million of them were denied freedom. The outbreak of the Civil War saw the desire to uphold white supremacy being cited as a cause for state secession and the formation of the Confederate States of America. In an editorial about Native Americans and the American Indian Wars in 1890, author L. Frank Baum wrote, "The whites, by law of conquest, by justice of civilization, are masters of the American continent, and the best safety of the frontier settlements will be secured by the total annihilation of the few remaining Indians." The Naturalization Act of 1790 limited U.S. citizenship to whites only. In some parts of the United States, many people who were considered non-white were disenfranchised, barred from government office, and prevented from holding most government jobs well into the second half of the 20th century. Professor Leland T. Sato of the University of Southern California writes, "Throughout the history of the United States, race has been used by whites for legitimizing and creating difference in social, economic and political exclusion. The denial of social and political freedom to minorities continued into the mid-20th century, resulting in the civil rights movement." Sociologist Stephen Kleinberg has stated that U.S. immigration laws prior to 1965 clearly declared that Northern Europeans are a superior subspecies of the white race. The Immigration and Nationality Act of 1965 opened entry to the U.S. to non-Germanic groups, and significantly altered the demographic mix in the U.S. as a result. 16 U.S. states banned interracial marriage through anti-miscegenation laws until 1967. When these laws were invalidated by the Supreme Court of the United States' decision in Loving v. Virginia, these mid-century gains had a major impact on white Americans' political views. Segregation and white racial superiority, which had been publicly endorsed in the 1940s, became minority views within the white community by the mid-1970s, and continued to decline into 1990s polls to a single-digit percentage. For sociologist Howard Winant, these shifts marked the end of monolithic white supremacy in the United States. After the mid-1960s, white supremacy remained an important ideology to the American far right. According to Kathleen Bellew, a historian of race and racism in the United States, white militancy shifted after the Vietnam War from supporting the existing racial order to a more radical position, self-described as white power or white nationalism, committed to overthrowing the United States government and establishing a white homeland. Such anti-government militia organizations are one of three major strands of violent right-wing movements in the United States, with white supremacist groups and a religious fundamentalist movement being the other two. Howard Winant writes,